Hello and a very big warm welcome around our OBE Campfire. Now for all the retailers even, I'm getting tongue-tied right at the get-go. I'll do that again. For all the retailers that may be joining us, this is an untapped area for you all that we're discussing. And we heard what you said, so we've actually put on OBE for the retail sector. And we're here to talk about cashless and cardless, the cornerstone of e-commerce. And we're excited to be having that discussion to help educate you. And open banking is no longer the best kept secret in your sector if you have a look at what Tesco's have launched with MasterCard. Now, at OBE, we believe that open banking payments should be ubiquitous. And clearly, as the founder and former chief exec of a card issuer, payments is in my DNA. Now, as a sector, we've actually reached over 3 million people using open banking today. The majority of the use cases are in payments, not exclusively, but I would say the majority are in payments. And what the panel are going to be doing with us today is to talk around the use case. And what I hear when we talk to our communities is it's use case, use case, use case. So that has been my brief to them. Now, we actually believe that we've got the best use case in town. And at the bottom of your screen, you can see our QR code. It's powered by Moneyhub, and we have Sam from Moneyhub on the panel today. But if you pick up your phone, okay, scanning that QR code, you can see how open banking payments works, and you can make a donation to one of 4 amazing charities. So please, during your time with us, do pick up your phone and make that charity donation. Okay, so before we kick off, I would like to encourage you all to ask questions to the panel and to complete our poll that you can see at the side on Slido. And what we will be doing, we'll share all those results on LinkedIn, and we'll be also sharing them on our new blog. So Giovanni will be continuing that conversation after our campfire tomorrow and the coming days around cashless and cardless, the cornerstones of e-commerce. Now, we have got a really an amazing panel, and it's going to be a provocative and a very informed debate. And I am delighted to introduce you to our guest host, Ali Paterson, the editor-in-chief of FinTech Finance. Now, Ali has made a huge effort, as you'll see when he comes on screen. A, he's on brand. B, he's got his own campfire. And I'm also wanting him to talk a little bit about the wrap he filmed at the weekend. So, Ali, without further ado, please, over to you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for inviting me here. It's quite a hell of a panel. It got quite heated in the kickoff call. I've had to rely on gimmicks because I've got to compensate for some of the stuff these guys are going to be speaking about compared to myself. I'm not going to talk about the wrap. We've got a thing going live on April the 1st. You'll see it when it goes live. It will hopefully be everywhere, but a lot of work there. So thank you very much for bringing me on this. We're going to be talking a lot about cashless and cardless. I'm disappointed that we're not going to be talking about the way that e-tail or pre-e-tail used to be done in the old days. With the postal order being sent in the post and then you get it all back. That those days are completely gone. But we want to avoid just digitizing the previous processes. So with that in mind, I'm going to introduce the whole panel now. First of all, we got Stephen. Stephen is from the Payment Service Regulator. Who are you, Stephen? What do you do? What's your day job? What's keeping you up at night?
Thank you, Ali. And no, it's a pleasure to be here. So I appreciate the invite. Stephen Bisoffi. It's actually the Payment Systems Regulator. No problem at all. So my role is I'm a payment specialist. I've spent nearly 20 years in the payments industry. I now support the PSR for short in managing some new projects and in providing industry and sort of payments expertise and advice into our policy team to ensure that when we come out with sort of consultations and call for views, they represent what's actually happening in the industry.
So in a nutshell, you will help banks, fintechs, retailers by saying what you're doing there. Yep, that's absolutely fine. But if you try and do this part here, you're going to get a slap on the wrist.
I do that, but I do that mostly for the PSR to ensure that our policies align with what's happening in the industry. Yeah.
Brilliant, excellent. And we've already heard that we've got Samanta Seaton on the panel. I was about to say podcast. That it's so weird doing this digitally. How are you doing today, Samantha? What exactly did you do? What's your day job in a nutshell? What's keeping you up at night?
Well, when I'm not getting telegrams, to keep me on point, I run Moneyhub, and Moneyhub is a wonderful business because it's a true win-win, because we sell our platform, license our platform to businesses, but it's all about delivering and delighting the end consumer, so their customers. And with a history in institutional financial services, I cannot tell you how energizing it is to genuinely be able to delight consumers. Really good.
Excellent. So the Moneyhub app, obviously very, very focused on open banking, couldn't really exist without open banking, focused on the consumers and the businesses themselves, including OBE.
Exactly, that's the QR code. So, I mean, I would encourage anyone that dares to say that open banking is still in its infancy to try the QR code out.
Excellent. We also have Amit from Accenture. Accenture, is that a big company? I've never heard of you guys. What are you focused on over at Accenture at the moment?
That's a good question. I'm not certain what we don't focus on. We do pretty much everything, in the management and technology consulting space, and that, I guess, is what my day job is. Speaking to our clients and advising them on multiple aspects of open banking. In short, sending them lots of 50 slide PowerPoints in size 4 fonts. If you may.
Good Lord.
It's quite interesting, and I look forward to this session now.
Excellent. And lastly on the panel, we have got Karl from Vyne, not the video streaming service, as keeps popping up whenever I do a search for you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do in a nutshell, because from what I gather, you've basically built a relatively solid innovation stack for helping small retailers.
Yeah, exactly. So we're an online payments provider. We leverage open banking to use domestic payment rails like faster payments in the UK to get businesses paid in real time, solving a lot of the inefficiencies that come out of having to accept cards. My background is purely in cards, actually, up until a couple of years ago when we started this business. I spent many years running payment divisions for big online businesses like Labrix.com, and then most recently as the global lead for digital at WorldPay. So I know all about cards, payments, payment acceptance and retailing, and all the inefficiencies that it throws off. So super excited to be able to be involved in a business and in an industry where we're making a real difference and trying to give merchants what they want, which is to get paid quickly, simply, easily, and without any of the fuss and the constraints that are put on them by an aging model.
Those 6 to 8 weeks, I mean, that's just, yeah, those 6 to 8 weeks after a card payment that are kind of a bit old fashioned now. Get rid of those, please. They're awful. So that's exactly why we got you here. Right. Let's go straight into it. So the first point that we want to touch on is the open banking payments and the impact it is having on the landscape as a whole. Stephen, can I go to you first on this? What are some from your perspective? What's some of the biggest impacts that you're seeing on the payments landscape by open banking directly?
So I would say, first of all, we really welcome open banking. And previously to the PSR, I spent some time working for the OBIE, the Open Banking Implementation Entity, and I've been involved since its fruition in the UK sort of about 4 or 5 years ago. I think what we're seeing in terms of the landscape, it's bringing in different types of services, different type of opportunities. One in terms of how merchants can reach consumers, and obviously how consumers can then pay and sort of execute those payments. It utilizes the faster payment rails, which is part of the payment systems regulator sort of jurisdiction. So faster payment system. Yeah. And what we're seeing is added competition in the payments, in the whole retail payment space, which from the PSR's objectives in terms of increasing competition, looking at end user outcomes, it's really welcome. It's something which through innovation is going to bring new products and services to the market. So from our perspective, still some work to do on open banking. I mean, we're not quite there yet completely when it comes to sort of the payments part of open banking, but a great initiative and something that we truly support.
Have you got a I mean, I've got an example from my end, but have you got an example of from your perspective what's been has been enabled by open banking that's actually had a really big impact?
So I mean, there's one provider out there that's providing a sort of a payment initiation type service to its merchants. So a large card payments company, and we know that actually that through that use and they used it for a specific charity that was taking place. It was actually the great, you know, the largest number of payments were made through an open banking type initiative. So we're seeing, you know, it's not every use case in payments at the moment utilizes open banking. You know, there are retail cases, there are sort of non-retail cases in terms of charities and things like that. But at the moment, it's very heavy, I think, on sort of on some of the non-retail specifics. But I think as we go into the retail space more and more, we'll see a lot more use cases. So from a personal perspective, I have open banking on a couple of my my apps, which I use, you know, through my phone. They work brilliantly. It's absolutely great. I use it both for payment initiation as well as for some account data aggregation. So actually, it's a dual benefit that open banking is bringing.
Absolutely. For myself, my first wow moment was with Stake and linking it with a Lloyd's account, and the ability to do that. I did almost have to take a moment and go, yeah, they need a little bit more friction in here, because I can see some people being a little and having to artificially throw in some friction. Samantha, can I come to you? What, from your perspective, aside from Moneyhub, what's been kind of a good use case of open banking, and how has that really impacted the environment, especially in retail?
Well, I think if we focus on retail, because we can go very broad as you know, but really focusing on retail, the bit that I think is really important for retail is back to, I think, Karl, you know, you were saying at the beginning, it's getting paid instantly. It's getting the money into your account, you know, straight from my account. And obviously the biggest windfall so far has been the charity sector, because, you know, they're very quick to spot, you know, that actually with a QR code, you can get money from me straight to the charity's bank account in 15 seconds. And genuinely at incredibly low cost, because it's technology at scale. And I think that's the thing that we haven't quite, I guess, cut through on the retail sector yet. And we were talking about this before, weren't we? That, you know, I'll give you an example. You know, there's some great innovations in the retail sector. I just can't quite understand why they haven't taken the open banking step. You know, like Shell and BP apps. You know, I don't do queuing, I don't do waiting, none of that. So obviously, as soon as those apps are available, you know, and okay, we haven't driven for a little while, but you know, when we were all out and about, you pull up, you scan the code at the pump, you've got your card, you know, that you're linked. You could equally have had your open banking payment account linked, but actually you've got your card linked. But the real bit that's amazing is you put you pre-approve, you know, £99. You then fill your car up with £60 worth of fuel. And actually, for the consumer, for me, £99 disappears to, I don't know where, it's not to Shell, that's for sure, disappears somewhere for a few days. And then actually I get a refund bit of, for the difference of what I didn't use at some point, you know, in that 3 or 4 days. And I often think to myself, you know, how reliable is that? And how trusting is the consumer of the retail world that all works? But how clunky is it? How terrible is that? Whereas I think I could have just said, yes, I pre-approved £99, I fill my car up, 60 quid goes in, and 60 quid's what goes straight through to Shell, like there and then, instantly. I don't get it. Why aren't all the retailers doing it?
I mean, I'm going to have to go across Why? That is, I mean, that is the big question. Karl, dealing with a lot of retailers and e-tailers. Why would they not want that?
Oh, I think they do want that. I think consumer expectations and experience are front and center to what every retailer wants. And that's one of the reasons why open banking works, because it does actually reduce the number of touch points in an online purchase. In a physical real world situation where you're making payments in a shop, I think there are a number of different constraints, and maybe that's something we can jump into later. But I think most retailers do want invisible payments, right? The ability to almost feel like your shopping experience has been shoplifting, where you walk out with the goods without having to have too much interaction, without having to queue. Sam, we were talking about this on the pre-call, weren't we? I think that's something that's really, really powerful, but there are some constraints. Some of that comes down to the regulations. Some of that comes down to the actual flow of funds and confirming who you say you are. But in terms of some of the other use cases, I think, where we've seen a lot of action is around money remitters. So particularly over the last year with COVID and perhaps people sending money abroad, sending home to families, international money remitters have adopted open banking, because that real-time flow of funds means they've got the liquidity to immediately pay out rather than having to carefully manage those flows. And funnily enough, a lot of the interest we're seeing coming in now is from travel businesses, who are typically the most constrained by banks and acquirers in terms of their cash flow, where the acquirers have to protect themselves against risk of loss from chargebacks. So proving really, really strong in those verticals as well.
Amit, if you're a retailer or an e-tailer selling quite high value items like, I don't know, tractors, I can understand, yeah, it's very straightforward, bank transfer, easy peasy. When you then with some of your clients look at the scale that you're bringing out in terms of the sheer volume of transactions, what's the opportunity there with open banking when it comes to actually deploying at a scale?
Yeah, no, very, 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 very interesting question. And we talked a bit about single immediate payment, which is that instant payment either through a QR code or through any other mechanism on your phone. But what's more interesting in terms of use cases is what is coming through, what's in the pipeline, and what is getting implemented by the industry. And the thing which I would like to point out in open banking is what we are calling as variable recurring payments. So once that gets implemented by the banks and within the ecosystem, we will see a big change in terms of how payments are done to retailers and merchants, especially how merchants can seamlessly and in a friction-free manner draw out and get payments from payers and their customers. So I think that will be a big improvement in terms of the journey, and it will reduce the friction, and that will drive up volumes. There are other things which are also happening within the space, which is worthwhile pointing out. Especially we talked about APP, which is authorized push payment, and the fraud which has happened on the back of that. But since the regulator has introduced confirmation of payee, that will significantly go down, and that almost that ties up very well with instant payments and open banking. So I think that's relevant to talk about. I don't know if people have heard about a new concept which is coming into payments called request to pay. So that's an additional area of interest, and especially for large billers who send out bills. Somebody like British Gas, who send out few millions of gas bills at the end of every month. That's a significant improvement in their current processes and how they can leverage open banking, especially for customers who don't pay by direct debit. And I guess that's particularly relevant in the post-COVID world, where you are dealing with customers who are not always in a position to pay immediately and instantly, and you need that digital dialogue with the customers and address the requirements. Lastly, coming back to e-commerce merchants, I think what instant payments and open banking based payment APIs will lead into is better, I guess higher percentage of checkouts or lower basket abandonments at e-commerce, which means, and this will happen because you'll be able to offer real-time credit and buy now, pay later type of things, which were pioneered by companies like Klarna, will really become mainstream. So quite a lot there, beyond the standard obvious use cases of payments, which I think all of this together will make this real, meaningful, impactful, and drive mass market adoption.
Right. Let's throw a grenade in here. And by a grenade, I want to talk about my gran. So my gran is incredibly technologically savvy up until around the mid 1960s, and then she has stopped. She sent us a telegram, and so I sent one across to Samantha earlier today to show they're still in use, which is incredible. My gran will not use a mobile phone. She wraps her card, I kid you not, in silver foil because she's concerned around contactless payments. If we do enter a world where you go into a Sainsbury's or wherever and it is QR code or an automatic payment over open banking, fantastic for me. My gran's not going to be able to do that. So how do we implement open banking, which is designed to be good for consumers, without leaving certain groups of people behind? Because for me, it's great, but my gran, not so much. Panel, over to you. Who wants to go first?
So well, I mean, can I just mention One Banks here, because I don't know if you can look them up, but One Banks is exactly designed for your gran. So One Banks is all about taking vulnerable customers that are being literally left in the dark, and actually enable them through facilities in villages, communities, shops, to enable your gran to use open banking, but with their help and their aid in terms of a kiosk situation. I really genuinely think, we should admire startups like One Banks, and there'll be others. I mean, they're not going to be the only one, but I definitely have to call out One Bank, so your gran isn't going to be left behind.
100%. I think it's important that all those companies out there get as much attention as they can.
I think the other thing to also recognize is that digital adoption is going up. So while I do admit that open banking, at least the initial version of open banking, would have slightly disadvantaged some people who are not digitally savvy. But I think that is changing, and we have seen that post-pandemic, where I guess a lot of people were in some sense forced to adopt some of these digital tools because of our needs around being touchless and contactless and all of that. So I think that generation who you are talking about is also starting to adopt open banking or equivalent digital channels to fulfill their day-to-day needs. And I agree with Samantha. One Banks is a fantastic example of something which brings together, which is a physical manifestation in some sense of open banking. And it is totally powered by open banking. Sorry, Steve,
that's okay. It's okay. I was just going to just sort of add in here. I mean, I think what's really important is, I mean, open banking itself is a way to enable payments to be made. And I think what's really important, I mean, from the PSR's perspective, end users and the end user outcome when utilizing a payment system, and obviously here we're talking faster payments in this specific example, is absolutely key for the success of any payments that are made. And I think whilst open banking is developing that sort of system, I think it's really important that the users of open banking, and by users I'm talking about the organizations that utilize the functionality of open banking, to then take those propositions to the customers, really understand what it means for example, for your gran, for I don't know, for a variety of different types of people in terms of different positions and vulnerable, etc. To make sure that those propositions actually fit the needs of those end users. I think open banking itself enables payments to be made in a sort of in a new digital way, but the end propositions are absolutely key. And we as the PSR, as we look at the work that we're doing, which is working with payment systems and the payment system users, is to make sure that when those things are being developed, whether it's a consumer protection proposition, whether it's a direct PISP type proposition, that the end user and all end users are really kept sort of at front of mind.
Very glad you said that there.
I'll just add to that, and I don't think these things are exclusive, right? They coexist, and I think open banking as a payment method sits alongside cards, just as contactless. I live in Northampton, right? We've had contactless for 15 years ish. It's only really kind of taken off in the last 5 years. If back in the midst of time when you went to a quick service restaurant in London, that's all you do. You've never handed over cash for a couple of years, right? But it wasn't always like that. It takes time to reach that point, and they coexist up until the point we've got adoption.
And the other thing, I mean, Ali, just on that, I mean, going back to the familiarity, I think one of the things that the retailers should be celebrating is the NHS app, which is training everyone to use QR codes. I mean, you know, I literally said to my husband when we were able to go out, you know, not that long ago, a few months ago now, but, you know, when we went in, you know, you scan your NHS app to get into the restaurant. And then I said, now I just need my bill to have the QR code to do open banking payments to pay them as I go out. So scan to get in, scan to get out. I mean, you know, simple.
This is why I love panels like this, because there's certain things that you cannot find from sitting Googling. Didn't even think of that with the NHS, in the same way that the London Underground trained people, first of all, to use TAP, and this similar thing. So yeah, put that down in the very small pile of things that COVID has actually helped push forward. We had a question come in from Paul at Vendorcom that I wanted to bring up to you all, which is around what needs to happen for open banking payments to move into the mainstream in merchant payments, and what does that mean from? I learned what this meant was a few moments ago in terms of an APP scam. What does that mean in terms of preventing these types of scams going forward? Could I go to you first, Steve, with this?
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, it's a good question in terms of what needs to happen for open banking to move into the mainstream here, and consumer protection, which is a hot topic today when we're talking about payments. It's probably one of the items which is sort of near the top of that list. So it's making sure that not only are buyers protected, not only making sure that the retailers understand the process, you know, when it comes to ensuring that their customers and they themselves are protected when a payment is taking place, but it's also making sure that consumers have that familiarity, that confidence in utilizing those new payment types. And different demographics will react differently. You know, there are the demographics whereby actually it's all about agility and speed and ease. But there are actually the ones which are very, very conscious about actually, are my payments safe? What happens if something goes wrong? What do I do? Who do I speak to? And in the cards world, we've had many years of chargebacks and, you know, all of these type of processes when you go to your issuer, your bank, etc. So authorized push payment scams, the consumer protection work being done by the PSR, all of these are there to enhance the payment systems, so faster payments, to provide that level of security around payments through the interbank payment system, i.e. faster payment system here. So in terms of, you know, trying to answer Paul's questions about, you know, what needs to happen, one of the things which needs to happen, which the PSR is very focused on at the moment, is ensuring that payments are safe and ensuring that people understand what it means by buyer or consumer protection in faster payments or interbank, which are the rails for open banking.
Karl, now you're dealing with a lot of these types of inquiries, I imagine, relatively frequently. What's your thoughts on this?
I'll just pick up on the point that Steve's made. I think in terms of consumer awareness and confidence and trust, it's super important. Obviously, as a payments business, we have to vet and approve and monitor the businesses that we give access to this facility. So you can't just jump on it and start transacting. So the risk of having a bad actor in the process to receive the funds is obviously minimized. That's super important. That said, you know, as I said at the beginning, we do think it should be simple and easy to be able to take money online. So, you know, we try and streamline that. In terms of what needs to happen, I think it's awareness, it's time, and to some degree it's to do with, I think Amit touched on earlier, the ability to streamline the consent model over time, away from having to give consent to every single transaction that you want to initiate, through to a model where you create a trusted beneficiary. So the business I want to transact with, I'm giving them approval to continue to take funds when I say so. You know, despite the fact that we think, and we know that we are improving over the card model right now, there are a couple of things that you can still do with a card in a better way than with open banking right now. And that ongoing subscription variable amount transaction process is one of those. So we've got a lot to learn from that, but I think we can take and build on it with the with the regulators.
Have you got an example where that's kind of live in the field at the moment, outside of the big one beginning with you?
Well, I think, what, in terms of the card process?
Yeah, in terms of that trust that is there, that you don't even think about how much the payment's going to be.
I think that those tend to be few and far between, other than utilities, maybe mobile phone bill. Amazon is perhaps you do know because you still have to go through the checkout process, but that kind of model where you've still got enough friction to know what you're going to pay and you understand what the billing amount is going to be is important. But having to go through two-factor authentication for every payment, as a lot of businesses are finding out right now, is not the most friction-free way.
Yeah, that's fun sometimes, not so much on the others. Samantha, can we come to you around this in terms of some of the, well, it's really around how innovative companies like you guys at Moneyhub and regulators can work together to look at these consumer outcomes in a positive way?
Well, I always take it back to the base principles and think, for retailers, they want to get paid, they need to get paid. And as a sector, really hurting, right? I mean, not pre-COVID was had a lot of challenges, but post-COVID has made it even worse. So all I would say to the retailers is just start where you can start. I mean, variable recurring payments are brilliant and will come, but forget that for now. Just take some cost out of your business. Enable me to pay, into your sort code and your account number. Let me do it. I mean, I had my nails done. I said to the person, can I just put the money into your sort code and account, please? And she said, oh, no, it's cash or card. And I'm like, well, I haven't got any cash on me. I haven't done cash for years. And I said, when I pay by card, it's going to cost you quite a bit of money. And she looked at me like I had two heads. And it's like, well, honestly, there's the other one when I had my car serviced. And I said to them, it was expensive. And I said, and they took card. And I said to them, how much do you take, in payment on a card? Up to 10 grand they take. Thinking to myself, my God, how much are they paying away? When people come and pay for their servicing. And I said to them, you have to sit there and go through all the stuff that they do with your car, which I'm not interested in, right? I assume they've done the car, right? I mean, I really would just like to pay and get out of there. But you think about how slick that process could be and how they could have the money from my account into their account now. Instead, they're paying for it to go round the roundabout. It's bizarre.
I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head, but then that is, with all the best fun in the world, that is the way that consumers like what they know. And again, to throw my grant, they don't like to change. That's always the hard thing. But then if you do show the benefits,
Ali, it's not the consumer. It's not the consumer. It's the retailer. I lay the challenge down to the retailer. So that car manufacturer, if they said to me, Sam, when you pick your car up, you're just going to QR code or you're just going to approve a payment into this account, which is, our account. I'm just doing that. I mean, I just want the car. I mean, they could even text it to me and I could pay before I even got there. So I didn't have to go in and find out all the stuff they'd done, just pick it up and go. But what I'm getting at is, it's not, we blame the consumer so much. It's not the consumer. Take my Shell analogy. It's ridiculous what I'm going through as a consumer, but I do it because it's convenient. I've got no choice. That's what I have to do. And I have enormous trust in the retailer. I have enormous trust in Shell that somehow that money is going off God knows where, coming back round, making its way to Shell, and you'll give me some money back in a few days. I have enormous trust. I think it's the retailers. It's time for them to step up.
Sam,
really valid point there.
I was just going to just spot on to that because I think you make a really, really valid point here. Because if you look at the different parties in the value chain, you've got consumers, you've got merchants, retailers. They are today supported when it comes to payment acceptance by acquirers who offer sort of their sort of or an ISO or payment gateway. And obviously on the back of that, you've got others, banks and card schemes, etc. And I think there is a real piece about actually ensuring that each party along that actually really understands the opportunities and the possibilities when it comes to payments. Because if I'm a small retailer, if I'm a garage and servicing your car, I take my advice for accepting payments from you, from my acquirer, which is what I do, which is what I've done for the last 15, 20 years. And you know, there is a process of information sharing there that you know, to educate those retailers. So while some big retailers that have payments departments may be a lot more informed, the smaller retailers rely on these parties, and I use the word acquirers, but you know, they sort of, you know, the payment acceptance organizations, to inform them about what are the opportunities, what are the possibilities here. And I'm not saying that they're not doing that, but so it's a kind of chain here. You know, the consumer relies on the retailer and their payment account provider to tell them, how can I use my payment account to pay for things? And so there's a whole chain about education, information, as well as the actual product and services, to make this whole sort of new open banking initiative a success, as well as what Karl was saying in terms of the appropriate product and services, etc. I just thought it's just important just to put that context.
I totally agree with you, Stephen. I think, you know, this may sound controversial, but my strong belief is that somebody should go and tell the gateway providers and acquirers that you have to offer open banking as a mandatory option, as a portfolio of services when you sell to a merchant. I know there are implications of this which you would understand more than me, but my strong belief is that something could be done at the regulatory end for the regulators to go and say that acquirers or gateway providers, when you go and speak to merchants and offer your services, you should offer open banking as an option. There is card only is no longer the way to go forward.
I just wanted to add to Seaton's point, if I could. I think making some really valid points. It definitely is, certainly for merchants to reach out. And I think the benefits are so compelling for online businesses that they should be pushing this to consumers, not just for the consumers in terms of transparency and trust and security, but the upside for the merchants is significant because the conversion rate is much higher, right? There's fewer drop off for new customers. You're not keying in 16 digits with fat fingers and thumbs on a mobile. You're not having to do one-time passwords from text messages. So the process is much better and cleaner, but really importantly, more transactions go through and succeed because the card issuers can't say, no, we don't like the risk profile associated with this transaction. The only reason the transaction fails is because the customer says no, or there's no money in the bank account. And that's a huge lift and boost to revenue. And once you've worked out what that means in a kind of contribution point of view, merchants will understand they need to put it at the top of their checkout.
Sorry, I'm just jumping in here again. I think it's also important to understand that, I mean, regulators look obviously at the whole 360 perspective here in terms of the competition, the end user outcomes. From an industry level, the acquirers play a key role here, and they also assess with the merchant themselves in terms of actually, what are some of the best payment acceptance types for that type of organization. And I'm not saying open banking is better than cards, or cards is better than open banking. They all have a place in society in payments. So it's very much a sort of a collaborative piece here to understand, this is how I operate, these are the payments I take, this is what I want to get out of payments. So what is the best way to optimize both my experience as a merchant and my customer's experience? Could be cards, could be open banking. And so there is a conversation to be had there to understand that the right solutions with the right products are being presented to the consumers for those right outcomes. And I think it's very much stems from an outcomes-based approach in terms of actually, what is it that they want to achieve.
I have been fascinated and got to recommend a book to everyone, The Innovation Stack by Jim McElry. It's the story of Square. And it's incredibly fascinating because at the time before Square came about, the cost of a card machine was incredibly expensive. It was a massive barrier to entry to accept cards. Square came along with that wonderful little audio jack. Everyone else pretty much copied it, and it just caused, in the US especially, the card acceptance to absolutely hockey stick. I feel we're almost at the same kind of point at the moment with open banking, and you can see the big change, your Sainsbury's and such, moving into that space quite easily because they have got that scale, that ability. But what about these very small organizations, your boutique stores? What can be done for them? Is there a barrier to entry in terms of the scalability and in the initial outlay in order to accept this? or is there solutions out there that can enable them to accept it quickly? And if so, why have we not seen that massive explosion, a bit like we saw in the US with cards? Sam, did you want to take this?
Well,
and a big old plug for Moneyhub as well.
Well, because genuinely, I think to Stephen's point and to Karl's point, the knowledge, I love, Amit, I love your recommendation that everyone, they're not aware of it. And I actually don't think the term helps either. Open banking, open payments sounds pretty scary to me. It's not something I'm about to do, right? If I'm a small merchant, well, I'm going to open everything up. All my customers' bank accounts sounds dire. So I think, the terminology isn't helpful, but I really think that the understanding that is lacking at the moment in terms of the retail sector or the merchants and the power that they've got, because genuinely, it is a sort code and an account number. You tell me what merchant hasn't got one of them? Honestly, it defies belief. I refuse to pay. I refuse to pay anyone now, without open banking. So I demand a sort code and account number, from anyone that I pay anything to now, plumbers, electricians, you name it, because I just think it's the little bit I can do to help them. I can get money in their account, in seconds, at virtually no cost.
With that in mind, cash isn't free as well. That's something I think there's a bit of a mindset that cash is free. It's not free to process. There's still a large amount of element, be it in time. Amit, can I get you to weigh in here in terms of that level of scalability and bringing open banking and open payments at scale to the masses?
I think the best example or use case I can point out is what has happened in India. So India implemented something called as UPI, which is Universal Payment Interface, probably around 10 years ago. And these type of payments which we are talking about, which is where you go to an e-commerce website and at the point of checkout you do an account-to-account transfer, which means the merchant gets paid immediately, the transaction is reconciled and all done and dusted for. That has been around for 10 years, and it is the mainstream form of payment in a country the size of India, where 40% of the population use UPI today. So it is happening at scale. It took them really 10 years to reach this point, and I also believe that in the next 3-4 years, we will reach a point where some of these things will start happening. Consumers will start understanding the benefits of this. Merchants will start adopting. And I go back to this point about merchants, and I do consult a lot of large organizations on payments, and I almost am stunned during my initial conversations that when I go and talk to them about replacing a gateway, they don't have a clue that there are better options out there than what they have today, and what they have today doesn't support open banking. And I often advise them that you need to replace your provider with XYZ, because that will give you flexibility to look for payment innovation or implement payment innovation in the future. So I think there are multiple things here around timing. We need to give it enough time for mass market adoption and build confidence, and through consumer confidence. There is a bit of education to happen with anybody who is receiving payments, whether it's a merchant, whether it's a large corporate, because sometimes they're just not aware of what needs to be done to enable open banking.
Ali, just jumping in on what Amit said, I think one of the things that will help to accelerate this is the friction with card payments. So this multi-factor that's kicking in, I think that is going to what I call level the playing field, because with open banking payments, you thumbprint or your face ID, so you do verify the payment in effect, which is obviously no bad thing, to verify a payment, that's okay. But what I'm getting at is, a card was so effortless before, wasn't it? You just go in and, you didn't have to do any of the multi-factor authentication. But I think with that happening, and also let's be clear, how long a card's going to last? I use my phone for everything. I don't need a card. So I think what we're going to see is two things that will tip it, in effect, what Amit was saying about with India, but we're going to see two things: multi-factor on the card and the fact that I don't actually need a card. When I go out, take my phone. Now, the fact that at the moment, Google Pay are using cards to link up to do what they do, but you can see it's not that much further, is it, before we're actually just going to be able to tap and go on the phone. We're not going to need a card.
It's almost like the cards are a bit like a telegram is for email, and the fact that we still have that exact everything seems to be built off the back of it.
Exactly.
For context,
Well, I mean,
Samantha, yeah, sorry, go ahead. I was just going to point that out.
I'm just going to add to that. I mean, look, 75% of the global e-commerce flow goes from one bank account to another. It's just there's a different type of token that sits in the middle, whether that's a card or it's a voucher or it's an app. It's account to account. And you know, in terms of scalability and massive adoption, like as Sam says, if we've all got one of these, if we can get online, we can generate a QR code or some other media to initiate a transaction, and the consumer confirms on his own device. And that's why it can be adopted much quickly, because we're not asking them to go to a merchant's device and confirm something and all the security we have to put around that with a PIN number or anything else. They do it on their own phone. And that means we can scale very, very, very quickly across, across a whole bunch of different use cases.
Karl, so can I just build on that? I mean, in terms of here, when we're talking about consumers and we're talking about merchants here, I think it's important to realize that for the majority of merchants, of retailers, payments is not their business. You know, they have their business and they utilize obviously payments to be able to accept payment for the goods or services which they sell. And so I suppose it sort of brings me back to a point that I was making at the beginning. It's about understanding that end user. And if we're talking about the retailer as the end user here of the open banking system, it's to understand, you know, that they are not in the payments business, you know, which is sort of what the majority of us are in. They're in the business of selling books, coffee shop, or whatever else it may be, garden centers, etc. And so actually, how these things are presented to them with the confidence that one, they're resilient and they operate really effectively. Two, that they provide their customers with a seamless and easy way to pay. I think it is absolutely key. So yes, the retailers have a part to play in this in terms of adoption, but it's important that to understand that payments is not, for the majority of it, it's not their business. And so it's down to us and, you know, the entire industry to ensure that actually they understand what's coming down the line and actually how this will affect their customers.
Big question out there. I had a friend of mine who, whenever he was driving down a hill many years ago, would always turn off his engine to save fuel. And if he was saving fuel, the amount of danger and energy in order to do that, to save that small amount, is ridiculous. Is there not a counter argument that moving away from what is tried and true with the card rails and having to put all of that energy into, if you're a small online boutique store, the amount that you'll be saved may be quite minuscule compared to, say, your turnover? Is there not an argument that maybe for them it's not worth it?
It's definitely not minuscule if you're a small business. Sorry, Sam.
Yeah, I mean, let's just think about that. So I spoke to a few cab drivers before. We think, you know, before they even start the journey, 40p, you know, to Izettle, you know, on every single ride, plus the percentage. I mean, those cab drivers, they can't wait to get rid of that 40p minimum commit. Well, I mean, you know, you can't blame them. Most cab rides are what, £7-10? Every single one, 40p plus a percentage.
Oh, but it's 40p. I don't want to have to learn something new for 40p.
But, well, the cabbies will. I'm telling you, the black cabbies in London, they'll learn anything to save 40p. I'm telling you, they're like your friend going down the hill turning their engine off. And I think that's the thing. You need people like your friend that does that for the rest of the world to understand it is possible. So I think it's going back to the point of we need those early adopters, don't we, to embrace it. And then that will help the others. But genuinely, you know, it's significant money that's going out the door on a value chain that did have a value in the past. So let's acknowledge it wasn't wrong at the time, but it's not right now. So we talk about the value chain, you know, getting you know, eroded and disrupted through through fintechs, and that's exactly what's happening here. Is the value chain is, you know, bringing the customer closer to the merchant, the business that they're working with. So this is just delightful for the consumer and the business, a proper win-win. This is not going down a hill without your engine or brakes on.
And actually, Sam, this is about choice and availability of different payment methods for these organizations. You know, it's enabling them to have a choice about actually how do I want to accept payments, What are the payment methods available to me? And that's obviously both from a retailer perspective or from a consumer perspective. So it's about having that choice that allows them, to understand actually what's the best option and solution for me.
Yeah.
Karl, I think you wanted to weigh in on there, because that 40p I can see scaling up quite a lot per day, per year.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you're paying away 1.5%, 2% plus the 40p on every transaction, if you're selling high average ticket items, it's significant. It's paying for all the inefficiencies that come out of this old model. It's just as simple as that, and managing all the risk that goes around it. And we don't need that risk anymore, because we can move the money directly. We can push the money from our bank accounts without the risk of chargeback, fraud, etc., etc. And that's substantial. The fact is that if we're able to give the customer a much better experience and UX in terms of approving their payment, more of them are likely to spend, more of them are likely to do it on a mobile, because there's a massive drop off on mobile, more of them are likely to continue with the payment because there's two-factor auth involved. The upside is there. Explaining that I guess a challenge, but when you bundle that up with a cost, it's huge. Businesses care about three key things. They care about reach, so getting to as many consumers as possible, so giving them the choice and options. Care about conversion, so how many of those customers are actually going to make it through and give me their money, and then the cost of ownership. And open banking ticks all those three boxes.
Excellent. Retailers need all the help they can against this backdrop.
I think I would want to share a very interesting statistic on this 40p, and the point is these 40p's add up. So if you take the global airline industry, and all of us might have experienced the ridiculous 2% or 3% surcharge when you're trying to book a flight ticket, even on EasyJet, and all of that adds up. The global airline industry consumes every year, pre-pandemic, $8 billion on interchange. So if you didn't have all of that, $8 billion would be just saved. And this is all of these 40p's and £1 and few pounds getting added up. So that's a huge amount of money we're talking about. So if you add up all of this, you would almost think that, I don't know, we can make a calculation of the UK economy on amount of e-commerce happening. And I wouldn't be surprised that bill is enough to pay for all of the money which we have lost as a country during pandemic. It would be that type of money. It is serious money which is going down the drain right now, in my opinion.
Yeah, and one other thing I'll just add, to this group, which we've talked a lot. And Klarna was mentioned before, but I've got another challenge for the industry. So here's another challenge for the retail industry. What about not just buy now, pay later? How about buy now and save later? So one of the things that open banking payments has done for the wealth sector is meant that you can squirrel money away into savings and investments, because it's now not the cost barrier to do that. So traditionally being able to put £2 into my investment, whether a pension, ISA, or even a savings account, there was no way we could support that, because those small payments were not viable. You couldn't justify it because of how much you have to pay away in able to get the money into the savings account. But now that we've kind of driven a truck through that, I would argue we need to have retailers that you can actually encourage buy now and save later. So actually spend this with me, but actually why don't you treat yourself to a little bit of savings as well at the same time? Genuinely, let's think about how innovative we can really get in this world.
The last thing I want to do with you guys, so I'm aware of the time and I want to go to any questions. I'm going to count that, Sam, as I want to get a minute from each of you of what you want the world to be like with open banking. And I love that with savings. Stephen, can I go to you? How would you want the world to be with open bank, in terms of this part of retail with open banking at the core?
So when I look out from a personal perspective and also as the PSR, there's sort of two or three things. One, I go back to that whole choice and availability, ensuring that consumers and businesses have choice and availability of different payment options, to ensure that they have those which suits them best in terms of their product and solutions. Secondly is actually a competitive landscape. Open banking brings in competition when it comes to payments, which is great. Whether it's competition amongst payment systems, whether it's competition amongst payment service providers. So actually, and competition will hopefully lead to good end user outcomes. And the third part really is what open banking is also driving, which is innovation, in terms of actually we are talking about payments here. We're talking about payments in retail and payments in sort of e-commerce. But actually, alongside payments, there are other innovations that are coming in that support that payments value chain, that support that customer experience when you're making a payment, which I think is probably a massively exciting thing about what's happening and what open banking can bring. So sort of, I stick by those three items in terms of what open banking can deliver.
I like that. Open banking is cool. Can we go to yourself? How would you want open banking to be at the center of the world in the future?
Yeah, so I think what this will all lead to is, from a payments perspective, I think it will lead to two things, and this is what I call as if payments: invisible and friction-free. Payment, we shouldn't be talking about payments at all. It should be something which is happening in the background. It is a part of your journey and experience rather than another transaction. And I think that is where I would like all of this to go. So whatever we are trying to do under the open banking agenda or the payments modernization or payments innovation agenda should drive towards that invisible and friction-free payment experience, which would mean things like Amazon Go or Alipay's Smile as you pay. This should be table stakes. Why can't every retail experience be like Amazon Go? The technology is out there already. It's a question of just rolling it out. And I think with all of the innovations happening and all of the new things which we're talking about, whether it is real-time payments, whether it is ISO, whether it is new payments architecture, these things are a real possibility in the not too distant future.
Absolutely. April the 12th, I'm looking forward to getting into the Amazon Go store in London. Yeah. Karl, for yourself, what do you want to see open banking doing in the future? What kind of elements do you want to see it to put it at the center?
I guess I'd echo what Amit and Steve have said already, but I guess for me, there's two key elements that we'd like to see. I mean, for us, open banking gives us an opportunity to really democratize access to payments online. So giving access to as many people as possible, and particularly businesses, and really kind of redressing the balance where today everything is stacked against the users, against consumers and merchants in terms of the risks and inefficiencies that come out of having to use cards today. So we'd like to see that redressed. I mean, and we think open banking does that. And then secondly, building the kind of technology and seamless payments flow that allows merchants to give their consumers those incredible experiences that they want to deliver to them and that the customers expect.
Excellent. Well, guys, we've got literally, so I can look at you this way, but it's flipped around. We've got 2 minutes left. I can't actually see the questions. Help me out. Have we had any questions come through?
We have had some questions, but what we have had is loads and loads of comments. And I have to say that everybody is loving the realism. So thank you very, very much. And Sam, your incredulous stance about merchants is going down a bundle. And I'm going to add in a couple of things. As I said at the top of this campfire, my background is payments, and I absolutely love the way we have started to democratize the four-party model. So when Sam talks about around the world, that in card acquiring terms is called the four-party model. And I wonder if there isn't a piece of work we should all do in terms of educating the merchants, in terms of framing it in what they understand, the four-party model, the card issuer, the merchant, the acquirer, and the card holder. That is the model that the card industry is built on, and all those acquiring fees, as Amit rightly said, do scale up. So all the questions that we've been having in have actually been comments, and we will share all those comments online. And I do think that this is a conversation that we will be continuing on our blog, particularly that piece of work everybody's asking for around the four-party model. But also, Ali, you have really, really pushed out the boat. And I'm going to have to say, everybody is commenting on your fire for a start off, and the way that you're actually pushed open. The comments I'm getting is lots and lots of doors. So thank you very, very much for that. And thank you for the panel for what has been, as everybody is saying, a debate based on realism. The one thing I did want to jump in, and this was one of the very few panel sessions that I actually had to keep putting myself on mute because I was dying, because it's sort of my thing. I was dying to add. so didn't want to interrupt the flow. But one of the things I do want to say is you mentioned a charity where there'd been a phenomenal amount of payments using open banking payments. That was for Captain Tom. So yet another phenomenal legacy that guy has left us. I think the figure that I last read was it was over 30 million. So that is, and the majority of that was paid by transfer, and that was, thanks to Captain Tom. So a user case that he's left us all with. Okay, so all that remains for me really is, so we finish on time, is to wrap up. And that is to say, again, Ali, please come back. Absolutely love the Telegram, love the branding on the mug. You put me to shame. That's what I need to come back to next time. Thank you. And the panel nailed it, absolutely nailed it. It would be remiss of me not to thank my own team. Absolutely amazing, the open banking team. Karina had a few technical issues, so she was late joining, but everybody has been able to see the amazing graphic recording that she's been doing, and we'll post that online. And I particularly love it when we speed it up. So I'd like to thank absolutely everybody. We will be continuing this conversation, as I said, on our new blog. And I would like to thank you for joining us. And again, thank you to the panel. I wish you all a lovely rest of the day and the best of health. Take care and thank you.